Chapter 6. Do you need to compete with Fu Jingzhou for a woman? Lyu Yu exhaled a puff of smoke and lazily lifted his gaze. Is there a problem? Problem? They didn't know what to say anymore. This problem was huge. After enduring and hesitating for a while, Shen Minghe couldn't hold back and finally said, "Who doesn't know that Su Wan Ci is Fu Jingzhou's woman? Lyu Yu, do you really need to compete with Fu Jingzhou for a woman? Especially considering that Su Wan Ci had been pampered by Fu Jingzhou for 8 years. In the entire upper-class circle, everyone knew that Fu Jingzhou treated Su Wan Ci like a precious gem. Previously, Su Wan Ci had been studying abroad, and now she was brought back to China by the director of Hualin Hospital. Everyone thought that Fu Jingzhou and Su Wan Ci were on the verge of getting married, so how did Lyu Yu suddenly marry Su Wan Ci? Listening to Shen Minghe's words, a glint of coldness flashed in Lyu Yu's eyes. He flicked the cigarette and casually replied, "I know. But that's all in the past. From now on, Su Wan Ci is simply my wife." Shen Minghe and the others exchanged a glance, not expecting him to say something like that. Zhou Mu asked, "Are you serious?" Lyu Yu chuckled lightly, "We've got the marriage certificate, we've made it official. What's not serious about that?" The three of them. There was a moment of silence in the private room. Shen Minghe looked at the still lit-up screen of his phone, where the conspicuous wedding certificate was displayed. After a while, Shen Minghe turned off his phone and spoke with an indescribable expression. "Lyu Yu, how did you suddenly decide to marry Su Wan Ci? She's been with Fu Jingzhou for 8 years. Aren't you bothered by that?" Lyu Yu put out his cigarette, reminiscing about the intimate moments from last night. He couldn't help but curl his lips into a faint smile. What's there to be bothered about? Everything she had now belonged to him. There was no longer any connection between Su Wan Ci and Fu Jingzhou. This statement caught Shen Minghe somewhat off guard. "You've set your sights on Su Wan Ci?" Zhou Mu was the one who asked. Lyu Yu thought for a moment and replied with a few words. "Delicate and tender, want to sleep." Damn. Did this guy really have to be so straightforward? Su Wan Ci was renowned as an ethereal beauty. Who wouldn't want to possess such a delicate and charming woman? And yet, she was snatched away by this playboy, Lyu Yu. Shen Minghe glanced at Zhou Mu's regretful and frustrated expression, chuckled silently, and changed the subject. "I'm more interested in why Su Doctor suddenly left Fu Jingzhou and got married to you." Speaking of this, after a period of silence, Chang Yizhou suddenly said, "I heard some rumors these past few days." Shen Minghe swirled the wine in his glass and glanced at Chang Yizhou. "Don't beat around the bush, just tell us." Chang Yizhou spread his hands and said, "I heard that 8 years ago, when Fu Jingzhou approached Su Wan Ci, his intentions might not have been pure." Zhou Mu furrowed his brows. 8 years ago, when Dr. Su's parents passed away. She was still a minor. What could Fu Jingzhou possibly want? Chang Yizhou shrugged. "I don't know the specifics, but I've heard that it might be related to the grudges of the previous generation." Hearing this, Shen Minghe sighed meaningfully. If it's really about the grudges of the previous generation, then Fu Jingzhou waited 8 years to seek revenge. He must have quite the endurance. Zhou Mu, sitting with one leg crossed over the other, looked at Shen Minghe with a meaningful expression. "Although we're not very close to Fu Jingzhou, we've heard quite a bit about his temperament and character. Do you really think that a sought-after rising star in the business world would spend a whole 8 years just to exact revenge and keep the enemy's daughter close to his heart?" Shen Minghe didn't answer this question. He didn't know how to answer it either. These days, it seemed like there had been some significant changes in the Fu family. But Fu Jingzhou had blocked the news. At least for now. There was no information from the outside world about anything between him and Su Wan Ci. While Shen Minghe and the others were discussing the past between Su Wan Ci and Fu Jingzhou, Lyu Yu remained silent throughout. He leaned back against the sofa, his hand resting on his forehead, the other playing with his thin phone. His eyes were half-lidded, as if he was listening, yet also lost in thought. At the same moment. Coffee shop. Yi Yunan had already ordered 2 cups of coffee. Seeing Su Wan Ci enter, she waved, "Wan Wan, over here." Wan Wan was Su Wan Ci's nickname. Very few people knew this nickname, not even Fu Jingzhou. Yi Yunan was Su Wan Ci's childhood best friend. When they were young, the two of them were always together, playing and causing mischief, just like any mischievous kids. Later, after the Su family encountered changes, Su Wan Ci went abroad for her studies, while Yi Yunan remained in Xiang City. Despite the distance, their friendship hadn't waned. On the contrary, it had grown stronger. Yi Yunan had chosen a window seat where she could look out and see the bustling traffic on Yubai Road. Observing her friend sprawled on the sofa, looking like a fairy had drained the life out of him, Yi Yunan teased, "What's wrong? Did young Master Liu's bedroom skills exhaust you?" Su Wan Ci rubbed her temples. "How do you know it's Lyu Yu?" Yi Yunan tossed her phone in front of her. "Lushing Group has made an official announcement, my ancestor." Su Wan Ci's gaze paused. Looking at the clear image of the marriage certificate, her thoughts momentarily froze. But soon, her expression returned to normal. Crossing her legs, Yi Yunan propped her chin on her hand and looked at her friend. "Spill the beans, little ancestor." Su Wan Ci raised her eyes. Yi Yunan began by asking, "What's going on between you and President Fu?" Others might not understand the relationship between Fu Jingzhou and Su Wan Ci. But Yi Yunan had witnessed their 8 years together and knew everything about them. How did things suddenly change completely? Recalling the events of the past few days, Su Wan Ci's voice was low, tinged with indescribable weariness. "When he appeared before me all those years ago, it wasn't a coincidence." Yi Yunan was baffled. "What do you mean?" "He said that my parents were responsible for the death of his father." "Yi Yunan? How is that even possible?" Su Wan Ci came from a family of medical professionals, generations of renowned medical experts. Especially her parents, they were prestigious academicians in the country, well known for their contributions to the field of medicine. Throughout their lives, Su's parents had saved countless lives and resolved numerous medical challenges. How could such legendary figures possibly be responsible for the death of Fu Jingzhou's father? Su Wan Ci shook her head. "I don't know the details now, but that's what he told me." Returning to her senses, Yi Yunan asked her, "If that's the case, what does his behavior over these 8 years mean?" Su Wan Ci was no longer able to fathom Fu Jingzhou's intentions. Or perhaps, she hadn't truly understood him since 8 years ago. Maybe he wanted to raise me to the peak before pushing me down himself, to satisfy his desire for revenge. Yi Yunan's initial reaction was, impossible. Fu Jingzhou's care and affection for Su Wan Ci over the past 8 years made even her, a single dog, envious and jealous. But on second thought, it wasn't entirely impossible. Yi Yunan was a journalist herself, well versed in interviewing prominent figures in Xiang City. She had heard quite a bit about Fu Jingzhou's reputation. They said he was handsome and wealthy, a rising star in the business world, and that was true. But they also said he was ruthless, cold-blooded, and that was true too.